call this meeting to order. So welcome to meeting 120 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. I would like to remind participants of the following points. Please wait until I recognize you before speaking. All comments should be addressed through the chair. Members, please raise your hand if you wish to speak, whether participating in person or via Zoom. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can. So we're engaged in a study of the review of the foiled terrorist plot in Toronto and of the security screening process for permanent residence and citizenship applications. So pursuant to Standing Order 108 Sub 2 and the motion adopted on August 13th, the committee is resuming this study. And I want to remind members that there is currently a Section 517 publication ban in place. A Section 517 publication ban prohibits the publication of any information, evidence, or representations made at or in anticipation of a bail hearing. Any bail conditions, reasons of the bail court, and any evidence or materials relied upon at the bail hearing are prohibited from disclosure. I would like now to welcome our witness, or I should say welcome back our witness. As an individual, we have the Honorable Ralph Goodale, former Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness, and current High Commissioner of Canada to the United Kingdom. Welcome, sir. I now invite Mr. Goodale to make an opening statement. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. After more than 30 years in the House of Commons, attending more committee meetings than I can count, both as a member and as a witness from time to time, it is interesting to be back in this environment once again. I hope that your important work on security screening produces useful recommendations. With respect to the specific events that sparked this meeting, I am not in a position to have firsthand knowledge of the subject matter. As you know, ministers and diplomatic officials, for that matter, do not engage directly in active agency operations. I recall the words of former Minister Jason Kenney, who often pointed out that skilled professional public servants, completely independent from politics, were always best placed to do the necessary work. Ministers should expect to be kept informed, especially about contentious matters. They can provide guidance through ministerial directives. Otherwise, they do not intervene. Within the constraints of a police investigation, the court proceedings, and a publication ban, I hope I can offer some context and perspective gained from on-the-job experience. For 4 years, from November 2015 to November 2019, I had the opportunity to work closely with the RCMP, CSIS, CBSA, and other relevant agencies to achieve two fundamental objectives: keep Canadians safe and safeguard our rights and freedoms. That period produced a number of policy innovations, increased funding, and new legislation supporting law enforcement, national security, and intelligence, including new and clarified powers to combat threats and risks. And now, for the past 3.5 years, as High Commissioner in London, I've had the chance to see the international end of this work. I meet periodically with the UK Home Office and their police and security agencies. I've participated in a key British security task force. I receive security briefings at least weekly from our own agencies, drawing on input from across the Five Eyes. I visit the highly secure venues where our Canadian security, intelligence, and law enforcement teams operate in the UK. It's clear that they are really good at what they do. They are highly valued and trusted by their international colleagues. It's also clear that the challenges confronting Canadian agencies also exist in the United Kingdom, across the Five Eyes, and in the countries with whom we have cooperation agreements. We all have similar issues to confront. Close collaboration with global partners is absolutely indispensable for our security and for theirs. It's a two-way street of mutual benefit, and it works. That's because global partners know and trust one another. We and they are all working toward the same ends, sometimes on the very same files. No one can do it alone. Everyone understands the huge importance of teamwork and reliable, timely information. The instant something of value is identified anywhere, it is relayed immediately to those who need it. As the public record shows in this case, our Canadian agencies made excellent use of the information just as soon as it was available to protect the public and take the suspects into custody. Getting such information in usable form at the earliest possible moment is always a prime priority. Searching the internet, especially the dark web, is a huge worldwide task. The technology is often impenetrable. The service providers are often unhelpful. The volume of stuff, gruesome, ugly stuff to be assessed is daunting. It's like looking for a needle in a cesspool. I worry about the well-being of the skilled professionals, Canadians and others, who tackle this vital work every day for national security, intelligence, and law enforcement. They deserve strong support. Their successes must be applauded, along with the international partnerships that empower them. And we all need to be committed to continuous improvement. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your attention, and I would look forward to our conversation.
Thank you, sir. We will start our questions at this point with Mr. Lloyd. Please go ahead, 6 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you for your testimony, Commissioner. I agree. We need to support our hardworking civil servants who are on the front lines, but importantly, we also need government to implement policy to give those hardworking civil servants the tools to protect Canadians. In a chronology given to us on the entry of the alleged terrorist Ahmed El-Didi, who was allowed into the country in 2018 on a temporary resident visa, and later that year he submitted an asylum claim which was ultimately granted. You were the Minister of Public Safety at the time, is that correct?
In 2018, yes, I was.
Thank you. Now in 2018, the same year that El-Didi entered the country, and a year before he was granted asylum status, your government stopped requiring police clearance certificates from certain countries of origin. Now, when this change was introduced, when you were minister, did you have decision-making power over that decision, and did you have any concerns about the decision to not require police clearance certificates from certain countries of origin?
Mr. Chairman, I heard this point being made in a previous meeting of the committee, and I have not been able, at long distance that I am, to be able to verify the facts of what exactly is being alleged here. It is something about which I have no direct knowledge because I was Minister of Public Safety, not Minister of Immigration. There's a difference in our ministerial.
Thank you. Surely, Minister, as the Minister of Public Safety, you know, I understand how ministries work. I understand that Public Safety and Citizenship and Immigration Canada work very closely together. And if a policy decision was made under your government when you were Minister of Public Safety to stop requiring police clearance certificates from countries where there is a very high risk, was this not concerning to you at all?
One of the focuses that we had in that particular year, as I recall it, was making the use of biometrics universal across the system. That would be within the purview of the public safety portfolio, whereas a decision about the other matter would not. But in fact, Mr. Chairman, when you look at the basic approach to security screening as it existed in 2018, as it exists now, as I understand it, and as it existed before our government came to office in 2015, the basic approach, the fundamentals of that system are the same now as they were then, and there has been no diminution in the quality of the investigations.
To suggest, Minister, that removing police clearance certificates is a pretty serious policy change. But I'll move on to my next question. Last year, there was over
Could you help me
680.
just to okay.
Sorry, thank you. Last year, there was over 682,000 study permits approved by this government. That works out to be a permit approved every 45 seconds. Now, I understand you weren't the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration, but in your experience as a minister, do you think that processing a permit every 45 seconds when we're dealing with people potentially coming from countries that are high risk is adequate time to vet people?
The experience that I've had with the people who do this work, at least the part of it that falls under public safety and CSIS and CBSA and the RCMP and so forth, is that they are very skillful. They do their work extremely conscientiously. And if they err on the side of being cautious. They take the responsibility of public safety with the gravitas that it deserves. I found that to be the case under the previous government prior to 2015. And I found that to be the case of the same officials doing the same job in the same way when I was their minister. I think both
and I agree,
before and after 2015 take it very seriously.
And
Politics has nothing to do with this.
I agree with you, High Commissioner, that hardworking civil servants are certainly trying their best, but when they're having essential tools taken away from them, like having security clearances put from countries of origin, we're really taking away tools from them. And in this case, I believe it was a potential tool that could have been used to prevent an alleged terrorist from coming to this country in the first place. However, your former colleague and the current Minister of Public Safety said that in this case, that the system worked as it was supposed to. But the fact is that our immigration system let in an alleged terrorist and ignored at least 4 risk factor flags, and then later gave him citizenship and gave student visas to 2 other alleged terrorists. Do you believe that this is truly how the system is supposed to work?
Mr. Chairman, I think the ministers have said very clearly that the very reason why they're conducting the review that they are conducting at the present time is to find out if in this case, or more broadly systemically, but specifically in this case, are there gaps that need to be filled? Judging by what appears in the public media to this point about these particular cases, and we're all operating under an information limitation of what can be put in the public domain and what cannot. But judging by what's in the public media to this point, no one had any information about a terrorist connection to these individuals until about June of this year. None of our agencies had prior access to any such information, and neither did the Americans or the British or anybody in the Five Eyes or any of our other allies also. When the connection was identified in about June of this year, it was immediately imparted and acted upon, and the public was protected and the suspects were arrested. Can all of that process in the circumstances of this case be improved upon? That is what the ministers are conducting their review to find out.
Thank you. Sorry, too much technology here. We go now to Mr. Gahir, please. 6 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, High Commissioner, for appearing before the committee. Just for the sake of the folks that are watching online, Mr. Lloyd just made a point that there's a student permit that's approved every single 45 seconds. There's no way that you can approve a visitor visa or a student permit in 45 seconds. It takes months and months and possibly years, as my constituents know, to get a student permit approved. There's a security check, an eligibility check, finances, amongst other things that are checked. So no, it does not take 45 seconds within which you can approve a student permit. Now moving on to the actual meeting today. High Commissioner, when you were the Minister of Public Safety, were you ever briefed on Ahmed Fuad Mustafa Al-Didi?
No.
No. So can you reasonably conclude that you weren't briefed on Al-Didi because Canada, like our Five Eyes partners and like-minded allies, were not in possession at the time of any intelligence linking Al-Didi to ISIS?
No, that's correct. And CSIS and other agencies have testified to that fact,
Yeah.
that the information first became available to Canadian authorities in about June of this year.
Yeah. And so how confident are you that once Canadian intelligence became aware of the threat posed by the two individuals, that they took all the reasonable steps quickly, efficiently to neutralize the threat posed to Canadians?
Well, I'm obviously not privy to the facts of the case, but just judging by the transcripts of this committee, which I have read, and judging by the public media reports, the various Canadian authorities that you would expect to be engaged, CSIS, CBSA, and the RCMP, acted very quickly to make sure that, first of all, the public was protected, and secondly, the individuals were arrested and brought into custody as rapidly as possible.
And High Commissioner, you were named Public Safety Minister, Emergency Prepared Minister in 2015 after a decade of conservative cuts to those different agencies that you became in charge of. Can you speak about the landscape of what it looked like when you first became Minister of this portfolio? And then what work did you undertake as Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness to ensure that our intelligence, national security, and law enforcement agencies were working properly and resourced properly?
Well, it involved a pan-government effort. I, of course, was involved, but the Department of Finance was involved in our analysis and investigation as well. Sister departments like immigration were involved as well. As I said earlier, I think in terms of the nuts and bolts of the on the street and at the ports of entry and so forth, the operations of our agencies, they are undertaken by extremely dedicated individuals who strive every day to do the very best job they can possibly do. And to find ways in which to improve their performance and make sure that we are all constantly getting better at the incredibly important task of public safety in an incredibly difficult world. Back then in 2014, 2015, 2016, ISIS was a growing threat in the world. Our government recognized that we needed to make sure that our agencies were properly equipped and in a position with the capacity to keep Canadians safe and to safeguard the security of the nation. Broadly speaking, we undertook to do three things: to bring in innovative new policies where that would be required. For example, this whole point of making biometrics broadly used across every dimension of what we do in the security checking process. It was used in some cases, but not all. By 2018, we had made it universal. We also improved information sharing with our international partners. We took steps to upgrade the quality of what we do under cybersecurity. Some of that was policy changes. Some of that was legislation we passed, if I remember correctly, with the help of all parliamentarians, at least 12 pieces of major legislation, including the anchor piece, which was Bill C-59. And over that period of 4 years, we also increased the funding available to these agencies by about 42% from beginning to end, which the government subsequently has continued to improve upon as well. But you need to make sure you've got the best trained people. They've got the legal mandates and the legal authorities to do what they need to do, that they are publicly accountable through all of our oversight and review agencies, and that they have the the enthusiasm of knowing that their government and the population stand behind them in this absolutely incredible mission of keeping Canadians safe.
Great. Thank you, High Commissioner.
On y va maintenant à Madame Michaud. Madame Michaud, elle est play 6 minutes.
We'll go now to Ms. Michaud for 6 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Goodale, for being here. It's much appreciated. We're really pleased to have you here to hear your comments because you were a minister at the beginning of these events when these two individuals.
I'm having a little bit of trouble with the sound. I don't seem to be getting the translation. I thought I had made that adjustment when I joined, but I'm not getting the translation from the translator. So could
Mr. Goodale, we'll suspend for a few minutes and see if we can sort this out. So if you be patient with us, we'll see if we can fix it.
yeah,
Thank
and my sincere apologies, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, no worries. We're suspended. Okay. A little struggle with technology by times. Madame Michaud, allez-y encore 6 minutes.
Please go ahead for 6 minutes, Ms. Michaud. Thank you very much. And can you hear the English now, the interpretation, Mr. Goodale? Very good. So thank you for being with us today. I understand that all the committee members appreciate your being there, given the role that you had at the time when these events began. I'm a little bit surprised. I'm not really sure what we're going to get out of your attendance. We've heard from the public safety minister and the immigration minister who haven't been able to provide us too much information. It's hard to know specifically what happened. So we can ask you questions about your experience when you were public safety minister, your cooperation with the Department of Immigration and the minister, how things were going. Did you feel that there were improvements that were needed? Did you see any difficulties? I'm sure that you are following events here related to immigration, and maybe you have comments about what you've read. We receive a great number of requests and files in our constituency offices. Perhaps you could give us your opinion as former Minister of Public Safety about cooperation among the departments, and also whether there should be any changes to improve the system. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the level of cooperation between the Immigration Department and the public safety portfolio is at a very high level. It was through all of my experience with my responsibilities, and judging from my seat in the opposition when I was watching the previous government back before 2015. There was a high degree of cooperation back then too, between immigration and public safety. In some other jurisdictions, those two responsibilities are actually in the same portfolio. Here in the UK, for example, the Home Office is responsible for all of the things that we would consider traditional public safety responsibilities, plus immigration. It's all in the same portfolio here in the UK. But in Canada, it is separated out, so it does require the ministers and their officials to collaborate closely with one another, and that, in fact, was my experience. One of the very first things we had to tackle when we came into office in the fall of 2015 was the Syrian refugee process, and that took an enormous level of collaboration between the Immigration Department, IRCC, public safety, all of the agencies within public safety, the RCMP, CSIS, and CBSA, plus the Department of Global Affairs, plus the Privy Council office, and that apparatus worked remarkably well, managing what was a very challenging objective, but one that was carried off quite successfully without in any way cutting any corners or compromising anything with respect to public safety. Safety and security was absolutely maintained through that whole project. So interdepartmental collaboration is fundamental, and I think in looking at this issue of security screening, it will be very useful for the committee, perhaps to move past the rhetorical debate and get quite specific about the things that you may identify in your hearings where improvements can be made. The ministers are certainly going to be looking for that, as I hear them speak about the review process that they have launched, and the committee could make a very constructive contribution. One area that I would recommend, because I know how important the international dimension is here, is maintain those cooperation agreements and those information sharing agreements in top-notch condition, and where you can expand them and get the collaboration and cooperation of new countries, do so, because that sharing of information among countries and among agencies is exceedingly important to make sure that when the decisions have to be taken, those that carry that responsibility have the utmost of information at their disposal so they can make a proper decision.
Je vous remercie. Il me reste malheureusement.
Thank you very much. I don't have enough question to ask you a second question, but I'll come back in the second round.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you.
Before we go to Mr. McGregor, Mr. Goodale, sir, if you could move your microphone down to just above your upper lip, just around where your upper lip is, that would be better.
Okay.
C'est bon?
Is that better?
Yep, thank you.
Good. Sorry about that.
No worries. We go now to Mr. McGregor. 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, High Commissioner, for joining our committee today and helping guide us through this study. I want to, my first question will draw from your experience as a Minister for Public Safety. And during the course of this study, we have had some discussion on police certificates. And I'm just wondering, from your experience, could you talk a little bit about some of the challenges that can arise from police certificates depending on what country they're originating from? Like we know that in some countries there are police forces which are carrying out the mandate of what could be an oppressive regime. They have varying levels of respect for human rights, and sometimes they just may not have the capacity that we're used to dealing with here in Canada. So could you talk a little bit about that, about some of the challenges that might exist with police certificates from other countries?
Well, you make a good point. The relationship between Canada and the UK is really quite extraordinary. And when our police forces exchange information, we can be absolutely confident that we each on both sides can rely on that information, and that it will have been collected with the proper respect for due process and the rule of law and all of the other principles that are fundamental to the way our societies work. In other parts of the world, some of the systems are not nearly as reliable. So when we receive that kind of information from those other parts of the world that may not share our values, may not share our system of governance or our legal principles, the agencies will obviously look at the information, and it will be part of their decision-making process. But they will also weigh what is there in terms of its credibility. They are making a decision not on behalf of that other country, but they're making a decision on behalf of Canada and Canadians. And accordingly, they have to bring Canadian principles, Canadian standards to bear on the probative value of the information. Any investigator always has those kinds of decisions to make. Some evidence is more compelling than others. Some information is more reliable than others, and you have to make sure you're making a good, credible judgment about how much weight to put on that particular point.
Thank you, High Commissioner. I appreciate that. Now that you have transitioned to a new role on behalf of the government in Canada, occupying the Office of High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, you did mention in an earlier answer that the UK government has the Home Office, which has two responsibilities in Canada in one department. I'm just wondering, though, like, are there any other particular aspects of how the United Kingdom screens for people? Because I know national security is of particular importance to the UK, and certainly it can be very visible when you visit London, among other places. But are there any particular aspects of how the UK does things that you think that we can learn lessons from? You know, because as a committee, ultimately, we want to make recommendations to the Government of Canada. So anything that maybe you could share with us that maybe could find in its way into a report and a recommendation?
It's a very interesting question. In many ways, many of our systems and approaches in Canada are already modeled on the British precedent. and I, I I think one point that that is taken for granted in the UK by the public, which would would probably raise eyebrows and raise questions in Canada, is the use of uh, photo identification. They say that London is the most photographed city in the world. That the surveillance cameras are everywhere, and when you walk around the streets, you can certainly see them. Photo ID and visual identification were important factors in the way the new Labour government here addressed the right-wing extremist violence that occurred in the UK about a month and a half ago. There were riots in a number of communities, a lot of very extreme civil disobedience, and the UK moved very decisively with their police and security forces, and um, dealt with that situation quite emphatically. And it was perhaps to be expected because the new prime minister, Mr. Starmer, is a former director of public prosecutions. So dealing with a crisis situation of that nature would be right in his wheelhouse. And I think, broadly speaking, people would say, while all of these things are always controversial, I think they would say he dealt with it in a very effective and forthright manner. But one area where this committee might want to look at a British precedent is the use of technology for the purposes of identification in emergency situations where you've got life and limb at risk, the potential for violence, where crowd control and the restoration of order is an important public priority. Using photo ID to be able to do that is something that proved to be reasonably effective in the circumstances of a few weeks ago in the UK. It's not nearly as developed in Canada. In fact, it's quite controversial in Canada. But maybe this committee should examine the pros and cons and have a good, solid, technical discussion about whether this is a valid innovation for Canada to consider.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. McGregor. We'll start our second round now. We'll go back to Mr. Lloyd for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my first comment is on these police certificates. I find it interesting that they are no longer required for temporary residents, and yet we're still using them for permanent resident applications. Wouldn't you agree, High Commissioner, that our hardworking civil servants have the training and intelligence to be able to discern between a quality police certificate report that comes from a country that is credible and a police certificate report that comes from one that isn't credible?
Mr. Chair, when the officials from IRCC were before the committee, I believe that they went into quite an explanation about how they determine what is appropriate for a reference for further security investigation and what is not, depending on the circumstances of each individual case. I mean, they are the
to reiterate my question, Minister, wouldn't you suggest that it's always generally better to have more information than less information and trust our officials to make the right call?
Within the bounds of what is reasonable, Mr. Chairman, obviously it's helpful to have more information if it is relevant and if you can get it.
Thank you, High Commissioner. Now, my next question is, I have here the terrorist screening data set encounters data from U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and it showed that in 2023 there was 484 matches on the U.S. terrorist watch list at land ports of entry along the Canada-U.S. border. And so far in fiscal year 2024, there's been 321 of these encounters. Since 2017, these numbers have gone up 123%. I think you'd agree, High Commissioner, that next to Great Britain, that our relationship with the United States is a privileged one and one of our most important relationships. Are you at all concerned with this skyrocketing number of terrorist encounters that the U.S. government is reporting, that we're at any risk and that the U.S. government is taking this seriously?
What I do know from my experience in the portfolio is that the relationship between the American agencies and the Canadian agencies is very close. It's very tight. We in fact enacted legislation to facilitate the movement of information back and forth across the border. It's important to them. It's important to us. We have to make sure that the quality of the information in all of the watch lists is as high and as comprehensive and as accurate as it can be, and that's a constant challenge. But the working relationship between Canada and the U.S. In protecting that amazing border between our two countries, which is one of our greatest assets both ways, is a
one of
very
our greatest
profound
assets as a
endeavor, and we
country.
work at it every day.
It is one of
It's
our
huge.
greatest assets as a country. It is huge, but seeing that it's increased by 123% since 2017, 484 last year, are you at all concerned that this skyrocketing number, if not stopped, could potentially jeopardize this relationship? Are you concerned?
I have every confidence that the Canadian authorities are very well respected and credible in the eyes of their American counterparts, and vice versa.
Thank you, High
And,
Commissioner.
th-
I'd like to
together-
turn it over to
Together,
my.
they do what they need to do.
I'd like to turn it over to my colleague Raquel Dancho. Thank you.
Left.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being with us. It's frustrating as a Standing Committee of Public Safety and National Security. We have yet to really receive any idea of how this could have been prevented and how what we need to be doing moving forward, despite multiple ministers and former ministers coming. It is frustrating, Mr. Chair. But I would like to move the following motion, Mr. Chair, on another very important issue. As it is as follows. I move that given that sexual assaults have increased by 75% and sexual violations against children have increased by nearly 120% over the past 9 years, the committee undertake a study of no less than 8 meetings on the rise of violent crime, particularly sexual assault and intimate partner violence against women and children in Canada, that the committee invite the Minister of Public Safety and the Commissioner of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to appear as part of the study for no less than 2 hours each separately, and that the committee report its findings and recommendations to the House. And Mr. Chair, now I have been away from this committee for a year. I'm very honored to be back, and in my absence I was quite concerned about a number of headlines that I had seen in Manitoba and across the country, which is what inspired me and the committee to put forward this motion today that I hope committee members will take seriously and will support a study in that. And I just wanted to put on the record before I wrap up a few of the stories that had inspired this motion, why I feel it's a critical public safety issue that we study. For example, in February 2024, all of Manitoba was rocked when we learned of the story that a Manitoba man was charged with first-degree murder in the deaths of his partner and 3 children, and now his 3 children were found deceased in a burning vehicle. It was a horrific week in Manitoba when that was found out. We're a very small community. Also in February, a Calgary man was sentenced for killing his 3-year-old girl who interrupted him playing a video game. I think we all recall that as well. In March of 2024 of this year, it was reported that 6 Edmonton children were killed in 2023, and that first responders, it was getting so bad, or has been getting so bad, that first responders were struggling to cope with that. It was also reported this past year that the accused in a child sex abuse case was wanted on a Canada-wide arrest warrant, where he sexually abused a child allegedly while on bail for sexually abusing a child. And within that, just yesterday, a convicted child sex offender was released from prison with a high risk to reoffend. This is in Manitoba. And just, I could go on and on. I have a whole binder of stories just from the past 12 months of what's been happening to women and children in this country. But even just right here in Ottawa this year, an Ottawa hospital reported that they are seeing a 30% increase in people seeking help for sexual assault. So I do feel very much, Mr. Chair, that this is an extremely pressing issue given the recent statistics, particularly concerning child sexual violations against children, up 120% in the last 9 years. And I do hope very much and very sincerely that this committee will take it seriously and agree to study this moving forward. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I find that the motion is in order. And Mr. Lloyd wishes to speak next. I'm wondering if, so we're getting near the end of the hour. I'm wondering if no? Okay. Carry on, Mr. Lloyd.
Yeah, and I want to be very quick because I want everyone to have an opportunity to question our esteemed witness while he's here. I'm obviously in support of this motion. I think it's a very important motion, and I hope that we can all vote for it very quickly and then discuss maybe more of the pertinent details at a subcommittee meeting around when these meetings will be, when witnesses will be. I hope we can all cooperate on this very important issue and get this out of the way so we can get back to questioning and get this very important study on the docket. Thank you.
Very well. Are there any more speakers? Mr. McGregor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you to my colleagues for bringing forward this motion. I think that it's certainly an issue which is top of mind for a lot of folks. I know that the Standing Committee on the Status of Women is also doing a similar study. So obviously, the fact that two committees are now considering this shows how serious it is. I think I'm in agreement with the spirit of what's being attempted here. I'm not sure if I want to specify exactly the number of meetings, so I hope my Conservative colleagues might be open to just leaving that open and not specifying exactly that we have to have no less than 8 meetings. Maybe we could include language of up to 6. And I know, Mr. Chair, we're going to have a subcommittee meeting following this, so hopefully that subcommittee meeting we can determine the order in which we do want to do our studies. But before I hand the floor back, so I do indicate my support for this, but I also a notice was given out of a motion that I want to move later on. I just want to verbally read that into the record. I'm not moving it, but the oral notice from myself would be that pursuant to Standing Order 108.2, the committee undertake a study examining how addressing gaps in community mental health and substance use health supports, including preventative and early intervention services, can improve public safety in Canada, that both the Minister of Public Safety and Minister of Mental Health and Addictions be invited to testify separately for 1 hour each in this study, that the committee report its findings and recommendations to the House, and that pursuant to Standing Order 109, the government table a comprehensive response to the report. So just make sure we have an oral notice of that motion, because that's something certainly I would like the subcommittee to look at later on as well. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Chair.
Did you wish to, so the motion on the floor right now specifies 8 meetings. If you want to change that, I would suggest an amendment.
Yeah, so I will take this opportunity to move an amendment to the motion, and it's a simple change, simply where it's referencing no less than 8 meetings. I would say of up to 6 meetings. And if it looks like during the course of the study that we do need more, I'm totally open to that. I just don't want us to set a minimum number at this point in time.
So Mr. Lloyd, followed by Madame Michaud.
I guess my hand was very fast. Wouldn't I think Mr. McGregor would agree that language of saying up to 6 meetings would prohibit the committee from adding additional meetings. So wouldn't of 6 meetings instead of that up to 6 meetings be a better amendment for that? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'll take Mr. Lloyd's advice and reword what he stated.
I hear the amendment as suggested. So the discussion now is on the amendment. And Madame Michaud, allez-y.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je pense que...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that this is a very important motion, and certainly violence and sexual assaults against women and children is something that concerns all of us. It's a great problem in Quebec and across Canada. I agree with Mr. McGregor's suggestion of 6 meetings to start with, and if we need to, we can add meetings rather than starting with 8, because that's a lot to start with. We can see when we propose our witnesses. I understand that there is another committee already studying the issue. Perhaps that creates duplication if we have a number of committees studying the same topic. We should perhaps look at what has already been done by the Status of Women Committee. But I don't see a problem necessarily with working on the same issue.
Is there any Ms. Dancho on the amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the comments from my colleagues and the support for the motion. Two things on the FIWO study. It did conclude, and there was a number of recommendations that I've reviewed. I wanted to make sure they weren't the same study, but I did think the FIWO, or the Status Women Committee, did do excellent work there. There was no focus on children in particular, which I think is missing. We rarely talk about children, actually, I found at committees, and just given what I had discussed and knowledge of our own, all of us in our own ridings of challenges being faced by children, and particularly in this with sexual violations and other violence. I just think it's a gap, committees at large across the board, that we should address here. So that was one area in particular, and they didn't call the RCMP, which is, of course, our national police force. I do feel that was, this is an area that we need to consult as well, because the RCMP doesn't only do frontline policing, but they do a lot of investigative work. They work with international partners. I just think there's a lot we could learn from the RCMP as well. But I do agree with the amendment, because I really appreciate the spirit of collaboration and the openness that if we do require more, if we're interested in a committee and we are learning a lot, that we could have more if necessary. But 6, I would agree to 6 for Mr. Chair, so I agree with the amendment.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment? Opposed? Carried. We now go back to the motion as amended. Is there any discussion, further discussion on the motion as amended? Seeing none, all in favor? All opposed? Carried. Thank you. We will carry on now with Ms. O'Connell and go back to Mr. Goodale. So, Ms. O'Connell, please go ahead. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, High Commissioner. I really appreciate you being here today and your testimony. When Minister LeBlanc appeared before our committee on this study in the summer, he also spoke about intelligence sharing relationships between Canada and the UK, in particular between CSIS and MI6. You, in your testimony here today, you spoke about challenges that both countries, and in fact the entire world, are facing, similar issues, growing threats in the world, and you specifically later, in answer to Mr. McGregor's question, brought up right-wing extremist violence. And I had been looking into some of this, and I think you're referring to the far-right disorder that had clear Russian involvement, and former MI6, the headline in the article is that former MI6 spies have said. And one of the areas, reading articles in The Guardian as an example, was one of the far-right mechanisms to create disorder and mistrust and distrust was to create news outlets on online platforms to look like mainstream American network news, and to specifically have individuals that are, in this case, UK citizens, promote and influence Russian interference and Russian media-looking type messages to impact politics and the democratic institutions in the UK. Is this a conversation that's happening widely amongst the UK government as it is here in Canada?
Mr. Chair, it's a conversation that I think is happening in democratic countries right around the world. this notion of misinformation, disinformation, the difficulty of being able to discern fact from fiction, fake news, as it's often called. This is something that democracies everywhere are struggling with. There's a lot of collaboration between Canada and the UK in dealing with this area of foreign interference. It's been a topic in the past among the Five Eyes countries, among the G7 countries. The UK perhaps has more experience than most. The UK often makes the point that the Euro-Atlantic security is a critical priority for them, and the most malevolent actor in the Euro-Atlantic theater is obviously Putin's Russia. That's evidenced by the awful, brutal, illegal war of aggression in Ukraine.
Thank you, High Commissioner.
and-
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I am limited on time. Given that very dire and dark picture you've just painted that the world is facing with such a brutal dictator influencing democratic institutions in the UK, in Canada, and abroad, and given that very serious testimony, Mr. Chair, I move that given the testimony of the High Commissioner and the unanimous adoption of the motion moved by MP Damoff on September 19, 2024, to initiate a study into Russian-backed interference and far-right disinformation campaigns intended to manipulate the Canadian public, that the committee immediately prioritize and begin this study. And I have copies in both languages.
Thank you. So I find this also in order. It's being very germane to the topic at hand. So is there any discussion on this motion? Ms. Dancho.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the motion. I do believe that the motion I put forward today is also very urgent, given the rise of sexual violations against children, the murder of children, what we're seeing with sexual assault with women in particular. I think it's important that this committee, that frankly in the years that I've been here, and I think many of us have been on this committee for a while, we have neglected this area of public safety. And I would also note that the Ethics Committee is also studying a similar motion, and I believe in that motion it said that they would be studying it immediately. So perhaps MP O'Connell can, maybe, I don't know if the Liberal members have an update of where the Ethics Committee is at, but I know that motion indicated some fair amount of urgency. So there is some overlap there. But I would say that in particular, my motion, I do feel very strongly that it is urgent, and it's been neglected as an issue across our committees, and in particular this one. So while I appreciate the motion, I do feel very strongly that my motion is also very urgent. But thank you, Mr. Chair.
Point of order,
Go to
Chair.
Ms. O'Connell, followed by Mr. McGregor.
Well, if I'm next on the speaking list, I just wanted to ask, since there does seem to be a speaking list on this and it being an hour, if we could let the witness go so that we can debate this motion.
Are we all good with that? Mr. Goodale, High Commissioner, thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
I know it's late in the day there, and I appreciate you spending time with us. It's always delightful to see you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your excellent testimony today. And with that, the committee is...
Thank you.
Debate.
Okay, so thank you, and then we will... what's the word here?
Let him go.
We'll let you go.
Dismiss me. Release me.
Release.
Please release me. Let me go.
You are released. Thank you, sir, so much. Bye-bye.
Don't say his name 3 times.
Okay.
So,
All right, thank you. So you were going to speak?
yeah.
Okay. And then Mr. McGregor, and then that's my list at the moment, so.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much. To Ms. Dancho's points, maybe I'll start there before I get into the substance of my motion and the debate. I don't disagree whatsoever in terms of studying violence against women, against children. This is crucially important work that we are going to do, and this is precisely why all members, it was a unanimously passed motion. There's no debate there how important that is. But we must also look at the fact that Russian influencers have potentially been working with, Russian state actors have been potentially paying influencers in Canada to disrupt our democratic institutions and our public safety. The High Commissioner was just here talking about examples in the UK of violent demonstrations that have been pushed for by influencers in the UK, with very serious connections back to Russian state actors. So this committee is tasked with dealing with sometimes multiple security risks at once, multiple studies, and, you know, it was just a few months ago that Conservatives stood in the House on a regular basis talking about foreign interference as being a huge threat to democracy. But now, all of a sudden, when there are connections to Conservatives and Russians, it's no longer a priority to be studied. I find that deeply concerning. I find it deeply concerning that we've approved this study and Conservatives now seem to be backing out of wanting to make it a priority.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. The member is spreading falsehoods.
That's not a point of order. In fact, you spread falsehoods every committee, and we have to listen to it. And that's actually the point of the study.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. It's against the standing orders to insult members of Parliament. That is deeply insulting. I have not spread any falsehoods today, sir.
First of all,
I ask that you
please,
enforce the standing orders, Mr. Chair. It
Excuse
is my
me.
point of order, sir.
Excuse me.
It is my point of order, sir.
We are suspended. You need to be recognized first, and not.
But you did recognize me.
And the point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is against the standing orders to insult members of Parliament. I have not made any falsehoods today or at this committee. I would appreciate if Ms. O'Connell would retract that statement. It is deeply insulting.
Thank you. So I think that the allegation that there was falsehoods proposed is an opinion. I don't think that's an insult. If Ms. O'Connell wishes to retract or make any adjustments, I will leave that up to her. Carry on, Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Clearly, this study has Conservatives nervous.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Arnold,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also take offense to the comments from the member opposite. Simply stating that Conservatives are connected to Russian disinformation, as she did, is generalizing all of us at this table.
So,
And I find that as a direct insult to these esteemed colleagues and our integrity. And I would ask the member to withdraw that comment.
thank you. I believe that's an opinion. She's entitled to make that opinion. And I will offer once again that if she wishes to withdraw, but she's just making an opinion. So, Ms. O'Connell, carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's been widely reported, it's not just my opinion, it's been widely reported that there are connections to Conservative influencers in Canada with links and ties. There, in fact, a U.S. indictment talking about Russian ties to influencers in Canada, and they happen to be influencers that promote conservative values and views. Now, who those conservatives that might be connected, I think that's precisely or not, if that's the case, would precisely be why this committee should look at that. If there is misleading information in the U.S. indictment, or that's incorrect, or assumptions being made that are not accurate towards conservatives, then there should be no fear of studying this or doing this very study. It was at our last meeting as well, Mr. Chair, that it was actually Mr. McGregor who, or sorry, I don't know if it was our last meeting, but when we discussed this motion, Mr. McGregor made an amendment to include CEOs or representatives from the various platforms, and I'm very grateful that he did make that motion, because in seeing what the UK is experiencing, and to make reference to what the High Commissioner referenced in his testimony about violent demonstrations, anti-immigration demonstrations that were again promoted by Russian state actors through local or alleged local far-right extreme supporters in the UK. And one of the things that was actually done in the UK was that Facebook took down posts that were spreading fake anti-immigration rhetoric. And I'm very anxious and curious to talk about with those representatives who we've all agreed to attend as witnesses. I want to hear what they're doing to address this. Because every day that goes by, and we've certainly seen it in the US, what happens in the presidential campaign when certain communities are targeted with misleading, disinformation, and misinformation, lives can be put at risk. There's a real threat to public safety. And I think we have a right to know as Canadians and as a committee to look into, are there violent extremists being funded in this country by Russia to not only target communities or immigration, and to see where the money is coming from and who it's going to. And if there's a threat to communities, and in particular, as in the UK, those demonstrations were to attack immigration and racialized communities, I think we owe it to Canadians to make this a very real priority, to hold social media platforms to account if they are allowing Russian-backed information and accounts to continue to run very dangerous rhetoric that could put our communities at risk. I personally represent a very diverse community, and I'd be very concerned if social media platforms would allow for or influencers that are Canadians that are being paid for by Russia to allow for any of my constituents or any Canadian across this country to be harmed because they didn't bother to look into the sources of this, I'd be quite upset. And we as a committee should be held accountable if we don't take this as a very serious priority. It's precisely what they're calling for in the UK. They're calling for governments to look into tracking of the money, travel patterns, and who is connected to Russian state actors that are coming into countries, Canada being one of them, to spread Russian propaganda for the sole purpose of undermining our democratic institutions, creating social disorder, and bringing violence against communities that they want to harm. And I think of our Ukrainian population in this country and how deeply concerned they must feel to know that Canadians who are posing as influencers or are influencers online are actually being paid to spread propaganda for Russia. I think we owe every single Ukrainian in this country the duty to look into this and to not wait another minute and start bringing witnesses forward. So I'll ask for a recorded vote, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. McGregor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the comments that were made by Ms. O'Connell, and I don't think anyone around the table underestimates the importance of this study, and that's why the original motion got a unanimous vote. So I think it's important for the Canadian public who are listening right now to understand that all political parties represented at this table did support that motion. I guess a couple things come to mind for me. Mr. Chair, we have a subcommittee meeting that was supposed to be scheduled for the second hour today, where we were going to meet to figure out our path forward, because we do have 2 draft reports that I'm sure we'd like to see completed, and there already have been a number of different study ideas introduced. So, you know, I want to make it very clear, it's not that I don't see this as a priority, it's just that this motion introduced by Ms. O'Connell is kind of forcing us as a committee into just this binary choice. And I think that we owe it to ourselves as a committee to have a discussion on the merits of all the motions that are before the table. So with that being stated, and with respect to what Ms. O'Connell is doing here, I think in an attempt to sort of lower temperature in the room and to have a more fulsome discussion, I move that we adjourn the debate.
Okay, there's a motion to adjourn the debate. A recorded vote. Okay, Mr. Clerk, if you would please.
Ms. O'Connell,
No.
Mr. Gay,
No.
Ms. Zaid,
No.
Mr. McDonald,
No.
Ms. Damoff, Ms. Damoff,
No.
thank you. Ms. Denshaw,
Yes, I vote in favor, Mr. McGregor.
Mr. Shipley,
Yes.
Mr. Arnold,
Yes.
Mr. Lloyd,
In favor?
Madame Michaud,
Contre.
Mr. McGregor.
Yes.
Yeas pour 6, nays contre 5.
The motion is defeated. We will carry on. Is there any further discussion on the motion of Ms. O'Connell? Mr. Lloyd?
Move that we adjourn the meeting.
A motion to adjourn has been made.
Then
And
move into
it's-
subcommittee.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
All right, so a motion to adjourn the meeting is in order. And could we have a recorded vote, please?
Ms. O'Connell,
No.
Mr. Gay,
Nope.
Mr. Zaid, Ms. Zaid,
No.
Mr. McDonald, Ms. Damoff,
No.
Ms. Denshaw,
Yes.
Mr. Shipley,
Yes.
Mr. Arnold,
Yes.
Mr. Lloyd,
In favor?
Madame Michaud,
Contre.
Mr. McGregor.
Yes.
So yeas 5, against 6.
Okay, the meeting shall continue. Is there any further discussion on Ms. O'Connell's motion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. Recorded vote, please.
Ms. O'Connell,
Yes. No, not during a
Ms.
vote.
Gay, Mr. Gay,
He already called the question. You can't interrupt a vote. The question has already been
Hold it
called.
here. Hold it.
It's not. There are no points of order
Stop,
during.
everybody stop. We can't interrupt a vote for a point of order, I don't believe.
Can we get
And
some
we'll
clarification
continue.
on the
I will
process?
recognize you immediately after the vote.
Can we just get clarification on what we're voting on? So
We're
it
voting
was
on
the
Ms.
amendment.
O'Connell's
Can it be
motion.
read again, please? Just need some clarification.
So you have been distributed, the motion?
To our emails, the amendment?
The clerk handed them out just now.
Thank you. So,
Anyway, so the vote is on the floor. We've had, where are we?
We'll start, Mr.
Ms. O'Connell has voted, yes?
Yes.
And we go to now,
Mr. Gay. Yes. Ms. Zaid,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald, Ms. Damoff,
Yes.
Ms. Denshaw.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Ms. Denshaw.
I'm just not clear what we're voting on. I'm sorry, I'm still confused, sir.
Just-
So we adjourned debate, but now we're voting on it. Is that clear?
No, we adjourned, we did not, we adjourned debate on,
We did not adjourn.
I'm sorry?
There was a motion to adjourn debate. It failed.
I'm just
Oh,
saying-
yeah, the motion
I
to
just need to
adjourn the-
understand
The
what
motion
I'm
to
voting
adjourn
on.
the debate was defeated. There was then a motion to adjourn the meeting, which was defeated. So this leaves us in the middle of a motion, and we're voting on that motion as been distributed to the committee. So the question to you at this point is yes or no?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Mr.
On this-
Shipley. No. Mr. Arnold.
No.
Mr. Lloyd.
No.
Madame Michaud.
En faveur.
In favor?
Mr. McGregor.
No.
No. Yeas, we, 6, and nays, 5.
So the motion is passed. Mr. Lloyd on a point of order.
Thank you. And I guess the reason I raise this point of order is because I believe the clerk incorrectly said something after the motion to adjourn and said that it was yes 6 and nays 5. And so I was of the belief that the motion to adjourn had been successful. And I don't know if the record will show that, but apparently on clarification, it was not successful. And so I asked to adjourn the meeting based on the misinterpretation that the motion to adjourn the debate had succeeded because I heard the clerk say something
So
differently.
by my count and what I heard was that the motion was defeated.
Yes, and that must have been a mishearing. I don't know if the record will
enough.
show that, but thank you.
Okay, we have distributed to the committee.
Chair, just, I have a point of order.
Mr. Moffat, a point of order, sorry.
Just, I think because I'm listening online, Chair, I just wonder if members could remember not to speak when they're not recognized for the sake of the interpreters. I was sitting here and just, I couldn't even tell who was talking, but there were discussions going on. I could hear between you and Ms. Dancho at the same time. And in fairness to interpreters, only one person should be speaking at a time.
Thank you, I appreciate that, and we will endeavor to do exactly that. So we have, the clerk has sent out a budget for this foiled terrorist plot in Toronto, et cetera, study. I believe you all should have a copy of it, and we need an approval of that budget. And so moved by Ms. O'Connell. So we have a vote now on the floor. All in favor of adopting this budget? Opposed? Carried. Okay. I believe that wraps up our business for this meeting. We will adjourn at this point. We are now adjourned, and we will commence the subcommittee meeting right away.